Now I have the great honor of getting to introduce our speaker, Mike Baker. He has been a wonderful volunteer for Brown, and we really appreciate everything he does for us. He is a serial entrepreneur and investor who recently recognized as winner of the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year 2013 award in New England. He is a co-founder and CEO of DataXu, a leader in programmatic marketing solutions and the fastest growing advertising and marketing company in America, according to the 2013 Inc. 500. I know that Mike's going to talk a little bit about his background, but I wanted to be sure you were aware of some of the things he has done that augment his background and give him a lot of different perspectives on our talk today. So before DataXu, he was a vice president at Nokia, where he created and ran Nokia Interactive. Being someone who's lived in Sweden for a while, I'm quite familiar with that. He came to Nokia through its acquisition of pioneering mobile media company InPocket, where he was the founding investor and CEO. He has also been the executive vice president at CMGI and Engage Technologies, which were early internet IPOs. Along the way, Mike was a corporate partner in a venture capital firm and a telecom and media lawyer in Washington. He's an angel investor in over 20 companies and currently chairman of the board of NextAge, which is a mobile advertising solutions provider. So Mike writes and speaks frequently, in addition, I don't know how he has time for that, about digital media, programmatic marketing, big data, and decision sciences. So I am very glad to welcome you, Mike, today, and I'm excited to hear about your experiences.
Well, thank you, Heather. I'm excited to join you. And with that, I guess I have control of the slide presentation. So, yeah. So today we're going to spend an hour, I guess, till 1 p.m. Eastern, and I thought I would present some information about myself, just entrepreneurial path, and to talk a little bit, give a mini pitch on my company to kind of give you a feel for what it's like as an entrepreneur to be, constantly representing what you do and getting shareholders and employees and partners on board, as well as to kind of talk a little bit about the underlying market trends that we're investing in, which are data and analytics and sort of the digitization of our lives, and then to shift gears and talk about, if some of you are thinking about becoming entrepreneurs, to talk about that. Some thoughts I have and ways of thinking about that I would share. And then lastly, to talk about sort of what's next after you've created a company that's viable and going, and how you actually scale a company, which is its own can of worms, and sort of what I'm doing in my day job today at DataXu. And I know Heather's going to jump in with questions along the way, which I welcome. So first of all, my background, which Heather gave an overview of, I'm class of '87 from Brown. I was an SNC student, which I don't know if the lexicon has changed at Brown, but satisfactory, no cookies, no credit was what it meant then. But for me, this is one of the reasons I went to Brown, because I really thought it was cool not to take grades, and I successfully earned a grade of satisfactory in all my classes, I'm happy to report. I was a semiotics major, which I think has been renamed, but like people who didn't take grades, semiotics as a major was widely derided and mocked. But for me, I actually learned something very important in the major, which was reading thinkers like Worf and Wittgenstein, who were, this idea that language shapes thought, shapes reality. And it's wound up, being absolutely inapplicable to anything specific after Brown, but, really instrumental in shaping how I think and manage and organize, in an entrepreneurial career. So probably pretty typical as a Brown path. Hard to connect the dots forward, but it all made sense at the time. And I took a lot of RISD classes in fashion design, just because it was a good way to make new friends. And I oddly wound up going into a more analytical direction after Brown, into law and telecom management, dual degree at USC Annenberg in Southern California, where I encountered conservatives, which was an interesting growth and development period for me. Conservatives who were very articulate actually, and I couldn't dismiss their arguments as easily as I thought. So I then went to DC and was entrepreneurial moments. One of my roommates in Brown started a company. It was called Clearview Software. His name was Steve Glenn, and he wound up selling that to Apple the year after graduating. And that was my first sort of experience of another entrepreneur or somebody who I said, you know, what just happened? That was pretty cool. He was able to carry a load of classes and work at night on this software startup that Apple bought. When I became a lawyer in DC, I started working with other entrepreneurs, and one of whom was an early internet. He was building a browser, and this led me to get interested in that space. Many of my classmates from '87 who had gone to business school or not were starting internet companies at this period of time, '94 and '95, and so I started helping them as a way just to stay in contact as much as anything, to be their counsel. And this led me into this sort of internet-oriented law practice, which then led me into a general counsel job for a company that was pre-IPO. And I sort of morphed out of being a lawyer into being just a general sort of, you know, the EVP of operations and stuff as part of this IPO of this company. And so that was a sort of non-intentional path, but really just following my interests and you know, what felt like opportunity. And interestingly, and this is very true of my entrepreneurial path, I've always worked hard, but the jobs have gotten harder and harder and harder, while, you know, the base pay has gotten lesser and lesser and lesser. And you know, of course, economically as entrepreneurs, you're not sort of working for current income. You're working for long-term shareholder value, and you know, the idea behind that is you're a primary shareholder, so you're really working, you know, for yourself. And since you know, since then I've been a serial entrepreneur. I did a stint as a venture capitalist, for 2 years, which was interesting to me to learn the business of funding startups, but it never felt like what I wanted to do. It felt sort of too passive, actually, and I like to team build and be in the mix on things. And I learned venture capitalists have an interesting role, but they have sort of limited moves they can make. They sort of buy and sell stock, and they hire and fire CEOs, but the rest is really up to the entrepreneur. I was lucky to have a company I helped create and run, InPocket, acquired for a lot of money by Nokia in 2007, and DataXu is a company that I co-created with an MIT professor and his students in about 5 years ago, and we've been lucky to be involved in a sort of a high-growth market where we've been able to you know, be one of the fastest-growing private companies in the country. I continue, as Heather mentioned, just do a lot of angel investments. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well, and you know, still sort of see the world through investor eyes, even as I spend all my daylight hours operating a company. So I'm going to shift gears, talk about DataXu, and in so doing, kind of give you a little bit of the history of the formation, you know, how the company got formed, as well as sort of what's the underlying, you know, economic marketplace opportunity that this company is focused on.
You know, Mike, just before you go into DataXu, I just wanted to say I find it really fascinating how you were able to maybe stick in some industries that you knew might not be the long-term place for you, such as venture capital or, you know, the legal side, but that had such a great learning value for you. And I know a lot of times students or young entrepreneurs want to jump all the way out there, but maybe they need a couple of other years, or they need that background that can help them jump into the next stage. So, yeah,
well, you know, I mean, there's two things that your comments remind me of. One is sort of what's your professional point of view? Are you, you know, in harvest mode, or are you in investment mode? And I feel like, speaking for myself and a lot of entrepreneurs, I think we tend to be, our point of view is we're just always investing, you know, so it's never harvest time. It's always time to, you know, reinvest. And professionally, that means, you know, getting yourself into experiences where you can really learn and grow and further develop continuously. And the second aspect is maybe a little bit more of a Brown reference point. I do think successful entrepreneurs are almost to a person, they're learners. They put a lot of priority on learning, and that correlates to this willingness to invest and grow. But from my vantage point, learning how to learn has sort of never been more important or more relevant, even in a more specialized world, because what really could I learn about machine learning and combinatorial math at Brown that I could apply out of the box? I can learn what I need to know by surrounding myself with the right people and the right experiences. So I think that sort of nonlinear path, or investing in things before trying to harvest immediately, is something that a lot of entrepreneurs do. Mm-hmm. So DataXu, it's a software company, which has been my path for the last 20 years. Software itself is a high growth industry. It's starting to mature as a category of technology, but the part that isn't is really the analytics and using so-called data science and collecting data, measuring it, trying to make sense of it, to develop insights to make business run better. And DataXu does this in a software system for the marketing function within big corporations. So think Ford and Toyota and General Mills and companies like Vodafone in Europe and Wells Fargo. Those are our customers. The technology itself, the seeds of the technology, are actually were PhD work by my colleagues Bill and Sandro for their professor Ed Crowley, who's a Ford professor at MIT. And I met this crew when I was kicking around after leaving Nokia and doing actually some entrepreneurship talks at MIT, and sort of met a bunch of really smart technologists who were looking for somebody to help them apply this really cool sort of combinatorial math language they had created to a real business problem. So that's the university-derived startups oftentimes sort of start with a solution in search of a problem, and I purposefully got engaged in that because I thought, I've never done that before. My new business creations have been they've been very pragmatic in solving a problem right away, and their legacy has been maybe a little bit less developed on the technology and certainly very little science. And, gosh, wouldn't it be cool to start with science, something that really is rocket science? In fact, these guys are all aero-astro majors. And then sort of, go apply that to a business problem, which has really been the path that DataXu has pursued. And I've been the person helping to connect it to the market and helping scientists to create software that codifies, their math language. And today we're 250 people in offices in 8 countries. We've been rated as the best technology by the leading rater of technologies, Forrester. And the company's been very fast growing given what's going on with consumers and data. So I want to tell the story briefly of what is going on with consumers and data and why is the company growing so quickly. So it used to be non-obvious. I think we all get it now. There's this digital lifestyle, for lack of a better term, we're all in. And it's really starting to transform not just consumer behavior, but just behavior. And we see it happening in the United States, but actually this is a global phenomenon, and it's even happening in emerging markets. It's a much broader trend than just consumerism, but for our purposes today, we're talking about the consumer aspects. So, the cell phones, the multiple connected internet devices, it's changing the way we communicate. Most users of the internet are now connected on mobile devices, and that's where all the forward growth is. It's also changing who we trust. This is an example commercially. When you survey people by age groups, who do you trust more? Family, corporate America, brands, or strangers? The answer comes back very differently depending on the age group you talk to. But what's fascinating is the millennials actually trust strangers more than friends and family. to make a purchase decision, and more than corporate America, obviously. And it's the wisdom of the crowds, right? So how we trust is changing, and also the way we buy. And we're actually just beginning to see this wave, but there's going to be a lot of new business opportunities around the applications associated with the mobile platform, which is now sort of pervasive in developed markets like the United States with broadband, and here comes mobile wallet and all of the sort of things on top of that will be its own sort of 10-year wave of innovation and opportunity. But this digital lifestyle, less obviously, is creating all of this data. So there's this term contrails for the sort of water vapors that come behind a jet in the sky, and you can see where the jet's been. And we sort of have these consumer contrails from this pervasive, always on, love it or hate it, it is our lives now. And the data that's coming out of the digital lifestyle is a new kind of data. It's not, Mike Baker, 89 Richdale Road, Brown class of 87. It's not sort of highly relevant, highly personal structured data. It's anonymous, real-time, sort of thin data, like, me searching, for a restaurant on my mobile phone when I'm in Manhattan. And that data that's created is easily captured and measured and used to sort of understand consumer patterns and what affects consumer behavior without even knowing who the consumer is. It turns out when you collect enough data, it doesn't even matter, because we behave predictably enough relative to things like advertising stimulus that you can use the inputs and the outputs to model behavior and start to get a much better sense of what is a relevant marketing investment. So this data is changing all the time now, and it's, you hear this term big data. There's just, oceans of new information. I mean, we're going up one order of magnitude, that's times 10, from 1.8 zettabytes, that's 21 zeros behind the one, right, to kind of a crazy number, and we're right in the middle of that. So, in fact, we used to want data, now we almost have too much. And so the problem, opportunities, and entrepreneurs like flipping over to, how do I deal with this? How do I filter out the noise? I don't need any more. I have too much. And when we talk about marketers, what DataXu is helping people doing is, actually devising a big data strategy. Obama has one. You can argue whether it's working, at least if the deployment of Obamacare is any indication. They're struggling with basic database technology, but it's becoming increasingly apparent that people need a strategy to deal with this. So this is really transforming marketing. And zero in on the niche function that DataXu sells to. We sell to the chief marketing officer and their agency, and we're sort of going from the world of Mad Men, which is fun to caricature, to the world of Math Men. And in the old world is these analog channels that people like me grew up with, TV, radio, and print. Things worked manually. There's a lot of middlemen, sort of trying to manage and understand marketing. There wasn't much data. The data that came in was slow and probably wrong, panel-based, static data sets, and there was a lot of storytelling and really opacity as to sort of what worked and what didn't. You've heard that old saw. I know half my ad investment's wasted, I just don't know which half. Today we're actually able to measure sort of what works and what doesn't, to, for instance, just stop advertising to people who don't want to buy pickup trucks. It's my favorite example because I'm in that category. I've seen tens of thousands of ads for pickup trucks, and there's really no conceivable way I can ever see buying one. And so, why do people still show me pickup trucks? So if you could just suppress irrelevance, forget about tailoring things even further, you would have dramatically happier people, happier marketers. And that's what we do. So we have a platform that sort of helps you collect and manage the data that connects to Google and Facebook and all these places where consumers engage these days to place ads, and obviously just the software management tools, and when you're collecting terabytes of information from your website and your Facebook page and all of the ad investments, the so-called paid, owned, and earned media, we have single advertisers who have 10 terabytes of information coming in a day, and it allows you to create very precise models of, who are my customers and what are they doing. I used to have the answers, but as the behaviors become more dynamic, I really don't anymore. So a word just about, before I conclude, the science. So the science is really interesting behind this. If you break down the business of advertising the way sort of a quant would, you'd say, well, there's three kinds of information that I care about when assessing what works. And the first is, the creative message, like what am I showing somebody? What's the content? And the second would be the consumer. Who is the person I'm showing this to? And if I don't even know who it is, which we don't know, there's no personal information in what we do. So, as I said before, it turns out not to matter because you have so much data that you're really kind of almost dealing with it in, for lack of a better term, segments. But the segments aren't segments; they're like microsegments. So it's not Mike Baker. It's 25 people who behaviorally, statistically, have very similar behavior dynamics, and you actually can predict how this microsegment will react when you do something. Context is the third variable. So what time of day is it? What day of week? What semantically is somebody doing with their device or on the internet? And those three data domains are what DataXu uses to build models. And each of these data domains has many, many parameters within it. And what a data scientist would say is we're doing a correlation analysis between dependent, independent variables and looking for where's their information gain, which one of these parameters it tends to accurately correlate to somebody buying a car after they've seen an ad or ordering a sandwich online. The insights about consumers are really interesting. So these are heat maps, which this is its own sort of sector of the economy now. As there's more and more data, how do I visualize it without just going blind from giant Excel spreadsheets? So this is a heat map that shows red is where in this three-dimensional table where you're seeing people in the evening on iPad minis and tablets are actually engaging with this auto brand's website. They're signing up for test drives. So that's interesting, and you're seeing it's sort of digital behaviorisms. You could sort of compare this to how people use their devices throughout the day when it comes to shopping from retailers, or do the same thing for financial services. We have a tool where you just kind of actually ask it different questions, and it shows you back the heat map to just basically understand this new digital behavior. So to conclude, we work with the world's trusted brands, and when you're teaching people how to use data to make their business better, you're really, it's a transformation effort. So what I've learned as an entrepreneur is we always talk about people and products and processes as part of the business mix. And we talk about product all the time, but it turns out from a customer perspective, selecting a product like DataXu is the easy part. The hard part is getting the right people on your team to make a change, much less a transformation. And coming up with new processes that are, data-driven in this case, where you're using sort of grounds-up evidence to work rather than sort of heuristics and rules of thumb.
So one of my questions is that just to ask a little bit about DataXu and that process. So when you first, were working with these entrepreneurs, you're bored because you're moving on and teaching classes, and you come across these people. Were you thinking, these devices are going to explode, and this will help manage all of that information, or was it just so flexible that once, all these different sort of tablets came on the market, it was easy to add them into the function?
Yeah, it's a good question. I had a working hypothesis, which I actually developed, as oftentimes happens, at my last job, which was Nokia. So Nokia had acquired my company and asked me to run a division, and it wound up involving travel to the point of just never seeing my family, and that's when I said, this is fascinating and fun, but it's not that fun. Right. And so I resigned. But part of the work I was doing was a strategy project to envision the world in 2020. And it was fun for me because I've never gotten to work with the McKinseys and the Bains of the world, but now they were at this big company at my disposal. So U20, create a model for me of prices globally, and U15 people do this econometric analysis. And we're trying to envision, what's happening in the year 2020. Nokia is a very global company, so I was interested in this answer. How are people using connected devices? And the idea was, let's develop a vision of what the world looks like then relative to our mobile device business, and then let's sort of work backward, back to the present day, and describe the assets and the tools and capabilities we'll need. The very sort of long-term, thoughtful planning process. Well, as I went through that exercise, I started to feel like I was really seeing the future, and it was great to have all these smart people helping to do the analysis. And one of the things I saw is, we're 98% of the world's population is going to be, accessing a connected internet device, probably. I mean, if it's not 98, it'll be like over 90%. And, sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, really, pretty much everywhere. And everybody is going to have different needs and wants from their device. And it's a personal computer that's, it's really ubiquitous computing at the personal level. And so there's going to need to be tools that help filter out irrelevance, and so there'll be sort of like decision systems. So this was kind of in my agitation cycle, and I was really excited by the idea. I just didn't know how soon to start working on it. When I met these guys from MIT, they said, we have this combinatorial math language that's really, it can sort through trillions of possible combinations of data and find the best list for a constrained, math satisfaction problem. And I didn't really understand what they were saying, but I started to think, I was like, wait a sec, maybe these guys are building that sort of like real-time decision system that would be at the nucleus of that sort of vision. And that was just a good sort of cross-fertilizing of ideas. So it sort of fired the thesis, and I said, maybe now is the time to start working on this rather than, 5 years from now.
So I had a good question that just came in, and I know you're getting to some of this, but I thought as you were going to move into a little bit more of the rest of the story that's not necessarily DataXu, but about Entrepreneur, the question says, I hear from VCs and angel investors a lot about passion and wanting to ensure you're passionate about the idea, concept you're working on. Would you say that you're passionate about efficient marketing, or rather it's acceptable that you're passionate about building a successful business?
Yeah, that's a good question. My passion is around really using data and analytics to solve a business problem. Okay. It's not actually sort of marketing per se. I think that's an interesting early application. What really interests me about this is actually, this kind of coming world of the Internet of Things, where we have a trillion plus connected sensors, in the pavement, in cargo containers, in hospital rooms, and all of that, of course, is streaming information, sensor information, like the temperature or light dark or sounds or visual. And so we have a very similar sort of data and analytics opportunity to sort of, not to endorse IBM here, but, a smarter planet, right? That's the theme they're on. I think that's a fascinating theme. I chose marketing because I thought, because it's all digital right now, that's actually a good early place to go practice this. But the concepts and the technology we develop will and this idea of streaming decisions in real time to optimize decisions. I mean, this is generically applicable even beyond business. So that's kind of where I find my passion in the idea. But I think that bit of advice is a good one, because maybe as a way to shift gears to this topic, if you're not passionate about what you're doing, you're just not going to have enough energy to do it. So, it's the gut check. So in a way, like, who cares what VCs say? I mean, I would really focus on, more of I start with introspection and kind of know thyself. So what would I say would be the test I would take, in the mirror test? First is, this is a non-orthodox way of working. So can I thrive in a truly unstructured environment? And I've seen people really struggle with this who are much smarter than I am. So I've decided it's its own capability. And you will have structure over time, but you'll have lack of structure from inception to, at least 5 years. That's been my experience. Second is energy. And simply put, am I prepared to work harder than I ever have on this? And as I said, the answer, honestly, you won't be prepared to unless you really care about it. So I find a lot of entrepreneurs, I'm married to a class of 87 person, Jen Cusack, who's managing a nonprofit, and that combination is surprisingly common because you have people who are just pursuing passion and interest, and a nonprofit is actually fairly similar. I mean, I know that sounds weird, but very few entrepreneurs are in it for the money because it's almost like there's easier ways to make money. I mean, that sounds strange, but I personally believe that.
That's why there's this growing social innovation section happening.
Yeah, well, which Brown's got a big handle on. I think that's a fascinating area, but it's not a force fit at all because the people who do both things are wired a little bit similarly. They operate on passion and belief more than sort of rational analysis and economics. Although, it's not obviously a cartoon. That's a cartoon distinction, but the leadership element is the next one. So, the VC thing here would be, well, do people want to follow you? Do you have the Pied Piper effect? Do people just naturally line up behind you? I think it's a little bit more subtle than that. I think it's like, do you have the support of your family? Do you have the support of your friends? And do you have the support of business partners? So those aren't necessarily employees, but they're people build companies, not investors. And so your ability to sort of build bridges and connect to other people and to gain their support, and it may not be jumping up and down. I'm really excited that you're doing another startup, honey. In fact, that can be like a horribly disappointing sort of conversation. I know it was for my wife. It's like, wait, you said you weren't going to do this again, really? Oh no, but you get support.
Hey, Mike, excuse me. I think somebody is causing a sound issue. Can you all just check to make sure that you're muted? Thank you very much. All right, go ahead.
Oh, what a well-behaved group. It's usually harder to find it. And then outcome, the ultimate test. Even if I failed hard after all this work, multiple years into it, would I have that sort of delusional ability to sort of still consider it a success at some level? Again, kind of an odd way to test it, but it's an extreme statement of, do you believe that you'll grow and learn in the process? And even if it was an objective failure, I've unplugged two things after I've gotten into them. And I've tried to do it early just because I know, how painful it is to progress with something that's basically not working for multiple years. But I do think even those failures, it's like I feel like I learned something, and I don't think of it as failure.
Is there a certain timeline that you try and see as a rule of thumb? I think Jose last year,
for getting something going.
For him.
Yeah, yeah. It's a good question. I don't personally. I think a lot of people I've talked to wanted to be entrepreneurs. They're looking for an idea. They're looking for people, and they're just kind of not finding what feels like a jumping off point. And my advice is always like, it probably speaks for itself at a certain level. Like if you don't feel it, then you're probably right. Don't jump. You'll kind of know it when it's congealed, I think. And so one of the reasons I like to invest in companies is because I'm interested in a lot of things, and I feel like I like to gestate. And so in a way, actually investing in Pocket, the company before this one, I invested in and helped for a while. So I was like, I don't want to do a startup right now. I don't have the energy, and that's just not where I am in my life. I had young kids, and I just wanted to focus on that. And what was nice, though, is I got to really work with a company in a different role, not paid, but help it grow, and then jump in at the right time and help it get to the next level. So I believe in like infinite gestation periods, and only sort of going when you feel conviction that it's the right time. So how do you get started? There's the field, the market that you would enter. What is it? A nonprofit, a profit? Is it profit purpose? Within any of that, what sort of industry sector, broadly speaking? There's the team. Am I doing this alone or am I doing it with a team? And if so, who are the team members? And then there's the specific product idea. When I first started doing this, I was really confused about how you do this. And I thought, oh, it's all about the product. I just need to come up with some cool product idea, and that's how you start. And I learned actually in venture capital that turns out to be sort of the third thing, not the first thing. And the way I would recommend people think about it is market. I think it'll more naturally connect you to a passion, to the earlier question. Because you have a lot of interest in the market. The one thing I would say is, if it's for profit, do yourself a favor and find a market that has a good organic growth. Another friend of mine from Brown, class of '87, who ironically, there's a lot of us who were randomly thrown together in Perkins Hall are serial entrepreneurs, and we're not sure why. But we always compare notes, and he always says, Baker, you know what, like I can build a better company than you, any day. The thing is, you pick better markets. And it's like kind of an interesting debate. And I'm like, you know what, you might be, I wouldn't doubt if you're right, because I'm very focused on, I'd like to get involved in a market that's just a huge rising tide. And if it, it's almost like a comfort to me. If I'm actually not the best person at executing against that, it'll still be okay. And maybe I can miss once and miss twice and hit it the third time. So I have a pragmatic view of like, do yourself a favor, choose a market with growth in it where you have that connection, you're passionate about it. Once you're there, think about team members. This is totally a team sport. I was a big high school athlete who stopped growing early and got progressively less good as everyone got big around me. And then at Brown, it was a band, and we did a band, and everybody in that band, actually went on to be entrepreneurs, and we're ad hoc team building and creating something out of nothing is, very comparable experience. And I think the team is so critically important. Investors will say, I only invest in good teams, but again, putting them aside, teams make it fun. And I think that the top level thought on teams is finding somebody that you admire and respect and want to work with and learn from, who brings a skill set that you don't have. And that was very true for DataXu, of working with, the Aeroastro PhDs for me. I was like, that's just so far from anything that I've ever studied or where I'll ever have real domain expertise. But we feel a common respect for each other. They believe I do something really well that they don't do or don't want to do. And similarly, I feel about them. And then I think once you get a good team in a good market space, you'll figure out the product. And the reason it's third is because, almost always the product will change. And you'll think it's one thing, and you'll get into market, and you'll, typically not meet with success. So the process quickly becomes adapting the product and the product vision relative to the very detailed needs that a market has, however that market expresses it back to you. So, people say it's an iterative process, product development. And so it turns out that good teams are smart enough, good enough to incorporate the feedback to perfect the product, to make it better. And if the good team is sort of working through this iterative process on the product in a good market, then the team has more time and more latitude, more survivability of the process, because the market's growing beneath them. So even if it's not perfect, they're still getting decent growth rate early.
So there are a couple of questions about this whole finding a right mix with technology people. So a person said, and I knew you were going to talk a little bit about this, if you have an idea, then how do you find the best, techies? How do you coordinate with them so that you do have that team? It sounds like, first your team has to be people who can say, yes, maybe this is part of the product, but what if we do this? What if we do this? But because it seems that, you had no technical background, and then you found yourself in that market and moving through it. Can you talk about that at all?
Yeah. So I think, my advice would be go hang out with the people who you'd want to recruit. In my case, it was very literal. It's just hanging out at MIT, talking about ideas. What I found is that you're building bridges with no sort of with a long-term approach, not sort of a tactical, I need to hire somebody, but just kind of dropping yourself into an environment where the thing you're looking for is readily found, and then you're looking to have engaging conversations with people in whatever venue that might be. For me, it was doing a guest lecturing to get in front of a bunch of engineers and professors, so it may be more literal. But what happens in any case is people find your ideas interesting, or they find them not so interesting, but they just think, hey, this is an engaging person who has energy and passion. And so, I think you start to have opportunities to connect with people that you otherwise don't know. One thing I've done with engineers always is really try to understand them. So, kind of seek first to understand rather than to, blah, blah, blah. And what I found is engineers, to me, work with engineers, I view them almost like artists. The really good engineers, they just want people who appreciate their work. So my approach has been, let me go on a quest to be appreciative of really good engineering. And interestingly, you'll network pretty naturally to really good engineers, and then you kind of sit down with them and ask to hear their story or what they're working on. And I still do this today with DataXu, and people are really gratified to be asked because, people like you don't usually ask me. You just tell me. So, right? Right.
I think it's great because basically what you're saying is that the skill that you have to have is to be a good listener, and you have to care about the people. If you're so passionate just about your idea and then you just want to talk about your idea, you're not connecting with the team or possible team.
Yeah, and you can, by the way. I mean, you can do it that way and say, I need to hire engineers to do my idea, and here's what it is. But it's hard, given the level of effort you're going to want from people. My advice is always I think it's better to get team members rather than employees, and to cut them in on the deal, and to start with, hey, do we actually want to work together? I mean, is there something about us as people where, do we have that kind of shared value almost? And I think that's been one of those little subtle, almost unsaid things that you wind up building really good teams if you start with common values. I mean, it's true of relationships in general, right?
Right. You also just in your path, one of the things that I always like to recommend to people is if you're trying to transition in career, so you're in the legal field, you're interested in high tech, so you become the legal counsel in the high tech field, then you gain that knowledge, and then you can move through the ranks.
Yeah. So how do you kind of move laterally into entrepreneurship? Start by within what you're doing, try to get some exposure to it. And yeah, that's in my case. It was I remember asking my boss at Wiley, Ryan & Fielding in Washington, D.C., a K Street political lobbying law firm. Hey, could I work on some internet things? And sort of like, well, what do you mean? What's the internet? It was that time, and it was like, sorry, the information superhighway, the connected version of that, not just like CD-ROMs, but and it's like, well, no, actually, we've got enough work for you to do, so no. And I was like, all right, well, can I use the law library at night to help friends? And it's like, as long as you don't get us sued, fine, So just kind of actively looking for ways to integrate, a new aspect and kind of pull over laterally. And the funny thing was, that anecdote's funny because serendipitously it was the drummer in my band from Brown who started an internet company that started to really go. And suddenly this law firm was like, wait a sec, he has a real client. And they said, there's like jokes about the CB radio and the internet's just a fad and all that. And that was the first time I think people started to look. It's like, wait a sec, maybe it's something more. So look for ways, to kind of throw the grappling hook, the ship you're on, onto something else to pull. That's not hey, I got to quit my job to start a company. But I do think, this concept of the mechanics, what you need, colleagues, we talked about, advice and mentoring, time, money. The time, we're really talking about time because, a lot of people say, do I need to quit my job? Like, I need my job. I need the money. I don't have the liberty of doing what you did, which is using my own money to start something new. And so what a lot of people do is they're kind of doing something at night. A woman who I've been friends with for a while, I just spoke to this morning, she's been doing something at night for like 3 years, which is developing sort of an information product for companies, and she's managed to bootstrap the whole thing herself. It makes, a couple $100,000 a year in sales. She gets about, $5,000 of profit, so it's a huge amount of work for very little, but, to her credit, she is actually now going to raise capital for it, and it's a, quote, profitable company with actually, it's gotten through some really interesting problems already, and she did the whole thing nights and weekends. That's an extreme example of the sort of moonlighting approach. Interestingly, she's been largely working by herself too, so our conversation was about finding colleagues and building a team, not actually raising capital, because that'll be pretty easy for her.
So Mike, we only have about 10 more minutes, and I'd like for you to sort of talk a little bit about those next steps. I think
Sure.
that, what did you call it, the dirt road period?
Yeah. So it turns out scaling companies is like the hardest part in my experience. It's even harder than starting, believe it or not. Somebody once gave me the image of, starting a company as sort of being in the jungle with a machete, chopping your way, at vegetation that's kind of in your face, and saying that over time you kind of do that and you see a little bit of daylight and you get out onto a dirt road and, you're relieved to be out of the jungle, and, you travel this dirt road for some unknown period of time, and it actually leads you to a paved road, and your journey is basically complete at that point. And this is an analogy or a sort of imagery for thinking about the life cycle of starting a company and growing it. So interesting. It stuck with me because the jungle is very clear what you need to do. Just hack your way towards any light you see. It's very like survival oriented, and you don't have to think about it too much. You just mainly need to do stuff and see if it works and adjust and keep doing the same. The paved road is kind of what we all know as our day jobs, and it's mature organizations with structure and process, and you can always run it better, but it's basically it's a very established way of working. The dirt road is kind of where DataXu is right now, and on one hand, it's kind of the most uncertain terrain. You're relieved to not be in the jungle. You have a real business, real customers. As people say, the dogs are eating the dog food. So you don't have to worry about that. But you're not on the paved road either. And so it's really unclear, how do I do this? How do I, it winds up like everything about entrepreneurship becoming really a people problem. What kinds of people can help me they're kind of hands-on doers, so they're sort of startup-like in that regard, but they have this other dimension that's very unstartup-like, which is they understand how to create process and almost sort of, soak it in at the right pace to not, saturate and create too much process too soon. So you wind up looking for people who are pretty rare. They're sort of doers who are big thinkers and have the sort of mental flexibility to modulate these two approaches in the right measure. So DataXu is coming towards the paved road now, and the paved road for us is an IPO in 18 months. I mean that's notionally what we're looking at, but it's challenging for me personally, and hence actually interesting because great, I haven't done this exact thing before, so that's back to the earlier question. That's actually motivating to me because I'm learning a new skill set the hard way by having to do it, for the first time. And the closing remarks, if you want to be an entrepreneur, start building bridges until they lead you somewhere. I mean, the idea about how do I meet technical talent if I have a great idea but I don't have the technical talent. Build bridges to people, share your idea. Don't keep your ideas secret. That turns out to be a myth. It's all about execution. When I was a VC, I was like, wow, now I understand why these guys don't sign non-disclosure agreements. In 1 week of meeting with entrepreneurs, I hear similar ideas like 5 times. And in fact, actually the fact that smart people have this idea is actually confirmation that it is a good idea, but it doesn't matter because it's all about doing it. It's all about execution. So share your idea, socialize your ideas, socialize generally, and build bridges to start to develop what you need to get going. Heather asked for my favorite business book. It's definitely Drive by Dan Pink, and it's about people, not I think more than it is about business, but it basically says, as soon as a task gets beyond the most simple task, what motivates people is not money. In fact, that can demotivate them in some ways. What motivates people is autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And when I read this book, I thought, wow, this person's thinking something that I've intuited for a while, and it's just really clarifying. And I think it's a great read if you haven't read it. And it's not just about business in that sense either. I mean, it could apply to child raising, or really any mode of dealing with people in complex task situations. Yes, we hire summer interns, although we're really focused on undergrads. So I'm a big believer and promoter of working with people where the cement is still wet and helping to develop the right habits and the sort of mental plasticity of college students and recent workforce members. And then lastly, I invest in new companies all the time, but just to give you a read, they're almost always local with great teams and in markets I understand and can help. I'm probably not that different than a lot of investors. So that's maybe some insight as you approach the money portion of the equation. Who's around me wherever I am. Locality still matters because for local, for early stage business, it's heavy lifting. You're going to need people to talk to and work with. I'm invested in a guy in Singapore right now, and we have these calls. Somebody's got to stay up late or get up early, and it's just extra labor, so it makes it harder, the collaboration. And the great team, that's what it's all about, and it's all it's about. It's really not your idea. It's you, and rarely is it you. It's you and your team. And then markets, I understand. I think you need to find people who you think would have an intuitive grasp of the idea you're pursuing. It is possible to get people just purely financially to invest, but they tend not to be very valuable investors. And you're also going to have a longer sales cycle, if you like, in getting money from them, because you're going to have to educate them on the market, and you tend to have a higher rejection rate when the person you're talking to really doesn't understand intuitively the problem that you're identifying. So those tend to be the sort of filters that I use, and I think you might want to consider those, as illustrative of many investors' filters.
Okay, Mike, this is a lot of wonderful information. We have just 2 or 3 minutes left. One of your key team players, relationships. Can you just say a few more words about sort of the networking process and what it really means?
Yeah, sure. what it really means is probably spending more time than you think you want to on it. Networking is like really inefficient in some ways because you rarely find the thing you're looking for in any given, let's call it networking opportunity. Mm-hmm. But you find connection points, and I think you have to start networking like years in advance of your goal. And so, if you're thinking about doing something entrepreneurial and you're not meeting a lot of people on a routine basis, I think you need to start there. And what are ideas? Well, there was a question about the technical talent. Universities. Hang out at universities. If you're a business person, perhaps, or you have an idea but you don't have the technical talent. I went to meet Jill Pfeiffer at Brown, who's iSperm, which is this advanced math lab. Mm-hmm. And I went down a couple of times, and nothing really came out of that other than spending a lot of time getting to know her. And I was like, someday that's going to come in handy. So I think you have to just network well in advance of yourself. Mm-hmm. So universities, if you're looking for team members who bring a business element, then maybe it's networking at an industry conference that's focused on that particular business problem. Maybe you're an engineer who needs, but I'd start with, what am I missing to do this? What are my weaknesses or just complete blind spots? That's step one. And then I think find venues that where people who can complement that weak spot just naturally inhabit. Mm-hmm.
Okay, those are some great tips, great insight. I really appreciate you being with us today. There was a couple of questions, but I hope for the audience that they feel like they got them answered, because I was sort of waiting for you to get to some of those processes, and I am very thrilled with the insights, and I am happy that you were able to join us today. I know you have a busy schedule. I have put a poll up there for people just so that we can keep moving forward. If you have ideas for other webinars or techniques, please send them on to me. We have tried to always increasing our services and updating our websites, and please check that out if you're in a career transition or you're looking for more resources. We have had a couple of other webinars on entrepreneurship, so if you have more questions, then please check that out. We also have 2 new tools. We're doing an Alumni Career Spotlight series, and there's a lot of great information about different careers, different career paths. If you're doing your research on different industries that might be inspiring, that might be a good way to go. Plus, we have a new tool for interviewing, so you can record yourself. If you have any other questions, you want to get to our website, it's there. A couple of people asked me how they would know when this was posted. I always post it on Twitter and Facebook. The majority of people who want to know are ones who weren't on the call, so I don't necessarily send it to you. But please send me an email if you want a response, and I will follow up with you. We will continue this series. In January, we have 2 webinars. We have that Social Innovator coming. We have Aletta Margolis. I don't know if you know her, Mike. She's a couple years younger than you, but she started the Center for Inspired Teaching in D.C. about 15, 20 years ago. She started as an Ashoka Fellow. She was originally in drama, so it's a great story, and it's a wonderful take on the education field. And then after that, we're going to really delve into just basics on careers and branding and using social media and that high-tech world to improve your career with Josh Waldman. And then hopefully we're in the works trying to plan a couple of speakers from LinkedIn to come in February. So watch for that. Mike, do you have any closing remarks?
No, that's it. I'm pleased to be involved in the webinar series, Heather. And if I can be helpful, my email is mike@dataxu.com, and feel free to ping me there. It may take a while for me to reply, but I do try to reply, so I'm happy to do so.
Great, thank you. Thanks to our audience. You were wonderful. You were actually very polite, and almost everyone whose questions I asked sent me a remark saying thank you, which doesn't always happen. So maybe that's that great entrepreneurial spirit at work. Thanks to everyone today, and hope that you all have a nice December. And the university will be closed over the holidays, and we will be back in January. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, sure thing. Bye, Heather. Bye, everybody.
Bye.